How's everyone doing? Today we're doing an ENFJ deep dive. We're going to look at all of their functions. We're going to go deep into their interaction styles and temperaments and really dive in to what makes an ENFJ an ENFJ. So let's get into it. At first, we start with extroverted feeling hero, the very first function, the apex of their ego. It's kind of the tip of the spear of what makes an ENFJ an ENFJ. It's very core to how they're defined. Obviously, there's other elements as well, but really everything is filtered through this function. It is kind of the peak. And really it's that main function they have. It tries to be optimistic. It tries to save the world. It tries to solve all of their problems. It's the way they try and communicate, have people like them, have effectiveness in their careers, relationships, and in their life in general. So it's kind of that main strength of an ENFJ, and we'll get into what that is and what that means. As many people know, ENFJs very people pleasing. They love to make other people happy, and FE is all about that. It's all about how other people feel, how other people, what they like, what they prefer, what they love, what they appreciate, what they value, what they think is good, what they're grateful for, value judgments, understanding how somebody's going to feel when things are said. FE is concerned with things like ethics, how it's affecting other people. Is it harming other people or is it helping other people? That's its core kind of objective. Collective feelings of the group, of the collective. Empathy, connecting to someone else's emotions, caring for someone else's happiness or sadness. Guilt, feeling bad if someone else is negatively affected by what you do. And just those general moral judgments. So it's very, very focused on that and how it affects other people. And some strengths of this function: great at utilizing empathy, caring for other people, being generous, giving, being selfless all the time, caring about people's feelings, being aware of what they're saying, being diplomatic, being able to manage situations, and being able to kind of understand social cues. That's something that it's very good at. But some weaknesses: it can be overly self-sacrificing, giving too much, looking for that external validation if it's overly used. And for ENFJs specifically, they're very heroic with this function. They use this function in a very strong way. They're trying to save the world. They're not just trying to kind of make people happy to get by or make people happy to just feel good about themselves. They're really trying to connect everybody. They're trying to improve the world. They're trying to connect families, connect friends, connect in their relationships, guide every decision they make through how it's affecting other people. And it's not just fake empathy. It's not just trying to look good. It's actually real. And they're very optimistic when they do so. They really enjoy making people feel good. They feel good about themselves when they're able to do this. They enjoy, making things fair, making sure that nobody's being harmed. And they're very aware of this. They're aware of everybody's emotions at all times. And they're very aware of how people are going to be affected by different things that are said. They're aware when someone else is saying something that's hurting someone's feelings. They're aware of these social cues. But yeah, like I said, weaknesses: it can over prioritize other people's feelings at the kind of behest of your own. So that's something that ENFJs can do, which can negatively affect themselves. But this function in general, very focused on other people's value, boosting other people's self-worth, boosting people's self-esteem, recognizing value, seeing value in other people, seeing the good in other people, seeing the good in humanity, and trying to bring out the good in other people, trying to believe in the good in other people, trying to do the right thing for other people. It's very focused on others. FE, very focused on other people's humanity, because that humanity is really tied to the feeling functions in specific in terms of our, language. But I think that we can go into that a little bit more with all the different functions. But for this function, very focused on humanity, helping humanity, idealizing, working towards a better future for everyone. And it's very collective. It's not just about being a good person themselves. It's about being good to other people, being able to contribute and contribute some kind of value to other people so that it can feel valuable itself. And so that's very important. FE, it's always working to kind of be fair. It's trying to make sure everybody feels a certain way. Everyone feels good. Everyone feels valued. Everyone feels equal. So it can sometimes struggle with prioritizing things, favoring one person or another, favoring one idea or another. It wants to see the value in everything. It wants everything to be fair, and it wants everything to be cared about equally. It cares a lot about that. And so sometimes this can be overgeneralizing, and it may lack a little bit of nuance when it comes to favoring one thing or another, or not feeling guilty about one thing or another, or understanding someone's inherent bad qualities in one person or another. It's trying to see the good. It's trying to be very merciful, very forgiving, very gracious. These are all FE traits. Compassionate. So it sometimes can be overly forgiving or overly graceful or overly compassionate, and it ends up actually being a little bit more unethical if people are hurt because of this overly forgiving nature. But that's the downside of the hero function. And every personality type, it has just so much of it. It has some inherent downsides by just having so much, but there's a lot of great things that come with that. It has so much that it's able to attack and progress with this function more than anyone else. It's able to constantly be using this function like no one else can, with an energy no one else has, in a way that no one else can do, to actually create change and to achieve its goal in a very unique way. While it may be a little less accurate in terms of the quality of its ethical judgments, it is way more active. It has way more quantity of ethical judgments. So it's just so active, and it's just so forward moving, that it's going to achieve a lot of what it wants just by that forward pressure, just by constantly moving forward. And so everything is filtered through this function. When we get into all the other functions, when they want to say something, they want it to help people. When they want to make a decision, they want it to make the world a better place. When they're having an impact, they want it to be a positive, ethical impact. So all of their ego functions tie into this, and even their shadow functions do as well. When it comes to their self-worth, they derive it from how they're affecting other people. And we'll go into all of the different shadow functions and how they connect, because everything filters up to this function. It is the function they have the most awareness of. It's the thing that they think they do the best, they want to do all the time, and that they're very optimistic about doing. And they feel optimistic about it when they use it. When they give someone a gift, they feel like it's going to make them feel happy. When they say something positive, they want that person to feel good, and they assume that person will feel good, and that person will like them, and that person will love them. And so they're very, very energetic when doing this, because they have an optimism about how the person's going to emotionally react to the things they do. And so where some personality types might assume people won't like them, ENFJs will assume people will like them. But that's not just apropos of nothing. It's because they're putting in constant effort to put other people's feelings on a pedestal above even their own, which we'll get to with their FI. So I hope I explained that enough. We'll come back to that function constantly because it's very important. Then ENFJs, they have NI parent, which mediates a lot of the ego functions, and it kind of mediates some of that extroverted feeling energy, which is so positive and optimistic and energetic and self-sacrificing. And it's to kind of keep it in check a little bit. It balances an optimism and a pessimism and a skepticism within itself. It tries to be responsible. It tries to do, the absolute best thing, the absolute right decision. And it's trying to obtain an ideal accuracy. It's not trying to, change the world at every single step, but it's trying to be as accurate as possible, as responsible as possible, to do the right thing, the balance between a negative and a positive perspective. And that's what they're doing with their NI, which balances other parts of their, 8 functions. So NI in general, it's about what a person will do. It's about what a person wants to do. It's their plans, their hopes, their passions, their dreams, their focus, their intuition, their, guiding thought process, their strategy. It's very focused on their willpower, their desire, their tenacity, never giving up, always wanting to hold on to things, always wanting to try again, make things work. Ted Lasso, for example, is an ENFJ. I kind of did the finger wag there. Ted Lasso is an ENFJ, and he has a line about that as well. I don't know if I remembered it correctly, but he has just a hard time letting go of his partner because he doesn't want to give up on that relationship. Well, that's a great example of that super high FE prioritizing relationships, prioritizing connection, people, humanity, and not wanting to give up on something, not wanting to let go, that grasp that NI has. And that's a good example. Great at making decisions, being decisive, planning, looking forward ahead, being creative, finding different paths, having an original idea, having an original, plan in place to make that come true, being passionate about those ideas, having passion for what they do. And that's very important for NI and NI parents specifically, being responsible with those passions, making sure those passions are helping other people, right? Back to the FE, making sure those passions don't harm other people, making sure those passions are doing something positive and making the world a better place, and that they're being responsible with their decisions. They're not necessarily going to be gambling all the time, although it depends on the development of the function. We'll get into that a little bit. That's maybe a different video entirely. The parent function, it often develops when people are in their mid-20s, early 30s. Nowadays, I think it's changing. just at the stage people are even becoming parents, is somewhat related to the parent function, because it's really about that responsibility. And so as an ENFJ gets older, it's going to become more responsible with this function, whereas some young ENFJs will be a little bit less responsible until they get a little older. So you'll see some younger ENFJs being a little bit more risk taking, bold, maybe gambling, maybe doing different decisions. And you might think, well, that's not NI parent. Well, it is. It's just not quite become a full parent. But in a general sense, that's how their NI works. And when it's developed and nurtured, normally it's going to be very responsible. It's not going to make stupid risks. It's not going to make stupid decisions. It's going to do what it thinks is best, really considering people's feelings, its effect, its impact, the consequences. It's going to try and make the absolute best decision. And they're generally a little more skeptical about the future because of it. They're not going to assume things will go well. They're going to assume that some things might go wrong, and they're still going to try to make the best choice with all those things considered. But it can be stubborn. It can have a hard time letting go of its decision making. It can have a hard time doing what other people want to do and following others' plans, because it really likes its own plans. And sometimes it just has that thing where it doesn't want to take risks, because it has that pessimism within NI parent, where it doesn't want to necessarily change the world with its plans and its future and its ideals, but it does want to do the right thing. And so it's just slightly different than the hero. The hero is more of that powerhouse. The NI is more of a supporting role. It's like the Robin to the Batman. It's not going to necessarily be out there fighting crime, but it's going to be assisting the other functions in fighting crime. So yeah, introverted intuition, very important to an ENFJ. Very focused on making that right decision without necessarily, being too bold, too risk-taking, too crazy with it. And then we have SE child. SE child, very idealistic and self-trusting, very strong function for ENFJs, relies on itself for its answers. It doesn't need any other input. It really, really believes in itself in this way, but it's very innocent. It's very pure. It has a childlike optimism and a childlike energy. SE in general, it's about what other people are experiencing, other people's needs, other people's health, other people's, it's kind of related to FE, and that's why a lot of people see SE as maybe empathy. FE is empathy as well, because SE is a form of empathy. It's an empathy towards a person's experience. So if somebody gets punched in the face, yes, you can kind of think, oh, they might feel embarrassed. They might feel bad about that. But also, what does it feel like to be punched in the face? SE is an empathy towards a person's 5 senses. So it's empathetic towards the person's experiences, their smells, their touches, their sight. It can tell what people are seeing, what people are feeling in terms of sensory experiences. It can tell what people are hearing. And so it wants to give people a good experience, show people a video that will make them laugh, and it can tell if they're seeing, if they're paying attention to it. It wants to show people something they haven't seen before, so a really good experience. It wants to give people a food that they're going to taste and have a good experience. So all focused on sensory experiences, and has kind of an empathetic component to it, kind of like FE. But just more focused on a concrete, literal experience as opposed to a more feeling experience, a more moral or emotional experience. So yeah, SE child, very energetic as well, kind of like the hero. It's kind of like a support to the hero as well, but it's more of an energetic sidekick as opposed to kind of a aware one. You could probably have some analogy with superheroes, but I don't know enough about the world to make a really good one. Maybe I'll have to think about that. But SE child, it's kind of a support to the hero. It's just as energetic. It's just not quite as utilized as the hero, but it's often working in tandem with the hero. It's flying on the cape. But it has some downsides as well, because it's obviously very energetic, very optimistic, and it doesn't need that external or that internal opposition. So SI Trickster kind of plays into it. It's very unaware, ENFJs, of their own experience, their own senses, and that makes them super aware of other people's experience, senses, health, needs. But then they can sacrifice their own health and needs because they're just so pure with other people. But they're aware of what is going on around them. They're observant. They're aware of what other people are doing. They're aware of other people's memories, trying to give people good experiences so that they remember them positively, and they really forget their own experiences and memories very easily when they're in the moment, unless they use a totemic memory in which they remember a specific thing, and then that kind of totem brings that memory alive. But on a daily basis, they're not in their own memories and experience as much as they're trying to be in other people's. It's kind of a core energetic thing for them. But sometimes there's some weaknesses of SE. Sometimes it can be a lot. It can be a really big experience. It can come out as rage. It can come out as physical kind of outbursts because it's connecting to that external world. It's living in the moment. It can sometimes react very quickly in the moment and have those big physical reactions. It can sometimes be focused on instant gratification, living in the moment, having fun, doing things in the here and now, making decisions in the here and now without always considering those consequences way down the line. And it can be very confident with its skill, its talents, its abilities, and it might sometimes not practice as much, but practicing for SE Child isn't necessarily something they're afraid to do because they don't mind that process of developing, practicing, and utilizing their skills. And they can be very pure with this. They're very energetic about connecting with the physical world, giving experiences, creating things, implementing plans in reality, doing something that's going to make people have a certain experience, doing something that's going to make people see something, hear something, and experience something. I've said that probably 100 times. But that's the focus of ENFJs, and they love doing that. And that's something that's very fun for them. Something that's a little bit less fun, but has a lot of potential, is their introverted thinking. And this kind of gets shoved down a bit because of all these other functions taking up so much headspace for them. TI Aspirational, it's trying to overcome its fear and be utilized more. It's trying to kind of achieve a hero status, a paired hero status with extroverted feeling hero, and make that ultimate impact when those combine, when the FE and the TI team up and make the ultimate impact. And we'll get into what that could mean. TI is all about truth. It's all about the other side of the coin. FE is about the impact of truth and how people are going to respond emotionally to truth, whether it will help them, whether it will hurt their feelings, whether it will make their life better. And TI is kind of just that truth distilled, that objective fact that has nothing to do with how it will affect people. It just exists on its own, regardless of the emotional impact that it will have, because it just exists regardless. It's a person's thoughts. It's their person's deduction, their analysis, their ability to figure out what is true based on, deduction. If this is true, then this has to be true because of this and of this. And they have that ability to deduct those things. Deduce might be a better word. And they're good at being objective, analytical, and factual internally when they give themselves that space to think when they're alone. And they're generally trying to be smart. They're really afraid that they're dumb, and they're trying to make sense and be right. And they want to be right and be heard in arguments and in situations with other people and in meetings and in everything. But they can kind of have a fearful disposition with their thinking because they're afraid. They have an uncertainty. Whereas with FE, they know how the truth will affect people. They know how things will affect people, but they don't always know whether or not they really know the truth. And they can be worried that they're wrong, worried that their thinking is wrong, worried their ideas are incorrect, worried their intelligence isn't up to par. And they can worry that those thoughts aren't properly clicking. But the good news is that they can achieve an accuracy with their introverted thinking when they give it the space it needs, when they focus on it, when they focus on overcoming their fears, doing things they're afraid of, doing things they're hesitant about. And they don't want to let this stop them. They don't want to go, oh, I'll just do what everyone else feels is good, and I'll work for external validation, I'll make normal choices, and I'll just do a normal path. They want to trust in themselves and have that ability to aspire and understand that their intelligence can take them as far as they want to go. And that doesn't mean it's necessarily a specific career. It just means in their life to trust that ability to analytically figure things out and believe in that objective fact. And when they do, they can really come to those great conclusions about what is true. But sometimes ENFJs may avoid that world. They may just want to, toe the line, be accepted by the group, be accepted by the tribe, and be liked instead because it's a little bit more easy, a little bit more comfortable. And they might be insecure, so they don't want to spend a lot of time thinking. They don't want to break things down logically. They don't want to be honest to people because they know it will hurt their feelings. They don't want to do that. But the ideal for an ENFJ is for those functions to team up and have that balance. Here, I'll kind of put it here. Have that balance between this is true, so it needs to be said, but it will help people because it's true, and I'm going to help people, and that there's truth in that, and connecting those two and being able to merge the intellectual world and the emotional world and have those team up and work together and have more people helped because of something being more true, and having that truth help people more because you actually know more, and that can help people even more. Connecting the caring and the analytical. So yeah, that's the main core of an ENFJ's ego, right? So we'll kind of go through it. Very optimistic about helping people, very sure of their ability to be liked, loved, and appreciated, and going for that, and trying to make people be grateful and give and be compassionate, forgiving, merciful, and kind. And very responsible, trying to be mediating, responsible. I said that twice. Mediating and smart with its decisions, making sure it does the right thing and makes the right choice and doesn't take a wrong step. SE trying to give good experiences, being very giving and generous with other people's senses, giving people the foods they want, showing people the things they need, helping people with their health and experience to have a good life. TI supplementing this by being aware of the truth so that they're not led astray and trying to think analytically, make smart decisions with TI and NI, have a positive impact that's actually based on giving true advice and true learning and true education, and being able to actually help other people by saying the truth, even if it's hard to hear. Oh, there we go with the mouse, because TI and FE are pairing up, and the truth is actually making people's lives better, and that's their core of their ego. That anxiety with feeling that they're not smart, that worry that they're not making the right choice, but that joy of being able to connect to other people and their relationships, which is something they prioritize. And then we have FI Nemesis, which is now you have the shadow functions, which are the kind of opposing functions. As you see, FE, instead it's FI. Instead of NI, it's NE. Instead of SC, SI, and TITE, it's those kind of opposite functions. Not completely opposite, but opposite in terms of extroverted or introverted. And the opposite of FE for an ENFJ is their FI Nemesis, which kind of keeps the hero in check. It balances out the opposing perspective with some worry, which isn't necessarily a good thing, but it is how it works. And it can be a good thing because it kind of balances out a person's perspective. FE is so focused on making other people feel good that sometimes it shoves down its feelings, though. And it's so focused on other people's esteem and how much value other people have that it doesn't think highly of its own value. It doesn't rate itself highly. It doesn't estimate itself highly. It doesn't always like itself. And it does this intentionally because it thinks, well, if I am hard on my feelings, other people will feel better than me. And if I, am able to what's the right word? Lower my self-esteem, self-degrade myself, other people will feel better. It kind of has this logic that if it lowers itself, other people can be raised up. And it does this to gain their external approval. It thinks, well, if I'm hard on myself, if I'm humble, if I think poorly of myself, other people will feel good about that because they'll feel good about themselves, because it assumes that other people have very, very high emotions and self-esteem. FI, all about how a person feels about themselves, a person's self-esteem, a person's values, a person's gratitude and appreciation for life. And ENFJs do have a lot of this function. It's very strong. It's still their fifth function, and it's good at being emotional and expressing emotional needs and being grateful. And some kind of weaknesses of this function for an ENFJ is it can avoid expressing those feelings. It might put other people's feelings above their own, and it can sometimes just be very negative. This Nemesis function, it's a nemesis, so you have to think of it as something that's opposing sometimes to yourself, your own ego. It has that opposing perspective. It goes, well, you're helping all of these other people, but how about yourself? Well, you're helping everyone else feel good, but are people making you feel good? Well, you're giving, but are you getting? It's kind of aware of that. It has a shadow awareness, and it's kind of purposeful to make sure that the ego doesn't run amok and sacrifice its other functions. Its other functions are still there, and they still need to be heard, even if they're secondary. They're not primarily being used. But this function for ENFJs, they can be very grateful, very appreciative, very joyous. They can really understand their values and what's important to them and appreciate their relationships. But they can feel very bad about themselves. They might feel stupid. They might not feel good. They might feel worthless. They might feel bad. They might feel like they're not doing anything. They might not feel like they're valuable. They might not feel that they've achieved anything or that they're very, smart at all. That's how they're going to feel because of this function's wiring, which is very kind of a nemesis perspective. It's kind of something that they have to fight with every day, like you would fight a nemesis. And they have to fight that kind of opposing perspective that's always there to challenge them and challenge their ego and attack their ego and say, are you doing enough? Are you good enough? Are you this? Are you that? And it's always kind of coming at them, and they have to constantly deal with that insecurity within themselves. And that's how this function works. And it can be difficult for ENFJs to have that worry that's very consistent. And unlike the aspirational function, which can gain a little bit more optimism and confidence when it's used, and it can become a little bit more like a hero function, this function can be difficult to manage. You have to kind of learn to live with it and find a way to kind of deal with that worry and that pessimism that's going to exist within your mind. Any critic, now onto this sixth function, is something that keeps the parent in check. So it's related to the parent function now, the intuition side. It balances out some of that optimism with a lot of pessimism. So this function is very pessimistic. NE is similar to NI, but a little different. NI deals with their own plans, their own wants, their own desires, their own, future. Whereas NE is about other people's future, other people's decisions, other people's desires, other people's intentions, other people's plans, what other people are going to do, and how that might affect them. And for NI, they're very optimistic about what they're going to do in their plans. Well, what gets in the way of that? Well, what other people are going to do? Are other people going to go along with my plan? Are other people going to sabotage my plan or betray my plan or go against my plan or be a nemesis to my plan? And that's often how a lot of these functions work. They're very opposing. And it's aware of that. It's aware of those things that could happen, things that could go wrong, negative consequences, things outside of their control. They might think, well, within my control, I'm going to do my best, make the best decision. But outside of my control, I can't control that. And so let's just assume the worst case scenario is going to come true. But, it can achieve a wisdom with this as well when it's being focused on, because it holds itself to a very high standard. It tries to hold, that function to a high standard in general, holds other people to a high standard of making the best decision. And they can be very critical of the choices people are making, critical of the things people are choosing, critical of the things that people want. And because it's so responsible with what it wants, it sees that pessimism externally. But some weaknesses is it can pressure people, because SC is going to be a default. It can take away people's options because they're afraid that people will make the wrong choice. They don't want to give people too many options because they don't want them to make the wrong choice, because as opposed to that, the ENFJ knows that they already make such good choices. And we have the SI Trickster, and this Trickster function kind of allows for the purity of the child function. Because it lacks this function, it allows other functions to shine. And there's a little bit of a blind spot here for ENFJs. So SI is about a person's own experience, a person's own, attention span, what they're looking at, what they're experiencing, what they're taking in, their own needs, their own habits, their own life. It's their own self. And obviously there's like a million things that are contributed to it. Their own routines, their own memory. And so for ENFJs, they can have a difficult time sticking to those specific things. They can have a hard time doing things that are good for their health. If they're not helping other people, but they're good for you, it can be difficult. An ENFJ might be like, well, I can do it. I'm not going to burden myself with worrying about my health. I don't want to burden other people. They're very focused on their effect on other people, not other people's effect on them. So it's the other side of the coin, how people are affecting their experience. They're just not aware of that. They don't care. They just want to be remembered positively by other people. They want to affect other people positively. So they forget their own memories. So they don't think about their own long-term past. They don't think about their own needs and their own experience and what they need as much. Obviously, this function can still be accessed, and it still grows over time. But there's a bit of a blind spot towards the sensations they're having. They might ignore health problems. They might ignore those things. They might be unaware of when they're uncomfortable or when they're comfortable, because they're just so focused on what's going on around them. But this is a function that can still be developed. They can sometimes, be able to develop this function more when they talk with other people about it, and through their external relationships, they can start to gain a further understanding of this function when they're able to focus on it more. And then we have their demon function, their final function, the TE, the very last thing in their mind. It's kind of a nuke button. It's something that has kind of a mutually assured destructive quality to it in the worst case scenario. So the TE is the complete opposite of the FE, right? So FE is focused on making people happy and contributing in some kind of positive emotional way, where TE is more about respect. It's more about what other people think of them, their reputation, their embarrassment, their social status with regards to how people are going to think. So are people going to think I'm stupid? Are people going to think I'm good? Related to these functions. So these are kind of the war functions, TI and FI, because they're constantly going to war inside of an ENFJ's mind. And there's that push and pull between, am I going to be valued? Are people going to care about me? Are people going to listen to me if I'm constantly people pleasing them? And then the T comes in and says, no, well, you need people to respect you. You need to rule with an iron fist instead, and have people forced to listen to you and force people to respect you. And so it has that very opposing perspective, as opposed to, you know, making everyone like you and hoping they'll listen to you and they'll value you because of that, versus let's just kind of gain that respect and have people think highly. ENFJs in general, they assume that people won't think highly of them. They assume that people will disrespect them and that people will not think that they're very good and not think that they're very smart, and they'll just kind of assume these things. And that's kind of how the TE demon is in default mode of assuming a disrespect, but they're always a little mad about it. They're mad that they're not respected. They're mad that they're always kind and people don't think highly. And they're mad that they're always thought of as weak or soft or too nice. And so deep down, they hold that resentment that they're not respected more, and that they don't even advocate for themselves, and they don't even respect themselves, and they don't even think they're good. And so why would other people think highly of them if they don't think highly of themselves? And that's the war within the ego for an ENFJ. The fight between gaining that respect through people pleasing versus gaining that respect through advocating for themselves and actually having their own high self-esteem and actually having their own self-respect, which is kind of the battle between an ENFJ's 8 functions. And when, they feel like people aren't listening to the things that they have to say and what they think, despite how much they've helped people, and when they feel like people aren't making them feel good, even though they make everyone else feel good, the demon function can come out, and it will completely disregard ethics and empathy and will be mean and cruel and cutting with its words in order to kind of adjust for how kind they've been and that it's not been reciprocated. And so that's the opposing side of an ENFJ. Then we'll get into their interaction style a little bit. ENFJs, they are structure types, which means their interaction style is direct, initiating, and outcome. They're direct, which means they're very straight to the point with their speech. They're directive with their speech. They're not going to talk for very, very, very long times about nothing. They're kind of straight to the point with what they're saying, and they can be very directive when it comes to how they interact with others. But at the same time, they're still initiating, so they like bringing up topics and being verbose and taking the lead in conversation. They're also outcome focused, which means they prefer taking control of things and having control in order to gain certain outcomes that they want, so that things aren't as chaotic and things aren't moving around, that they have some kind of control in their life. ENFJs are also idealist personality types, so they're focused on being abstract, focusing on the future, seeing where things are going, being innovative and creative. They're also very affiliative. They like to work on a team, work with others, being able to work with other people and not necessarily have to do it all alone. They want that positive impact. They want that positive social utopia. They're also interest focused, which means they understand the individual motives of other people, that people will get something out of specific situations, and they try and be fair to every specific person. And ENFJ's 4 sides of the mind are, of course, ENFJ in the ego, and then we talked a bit about the shadow functions with the INFP, which is what the shadow functions make up, and then the super ego led with TE, and then the subconscious led with TI and ISTP. So in ENFJ, they sit in their ego, they have a good time, that's generally where they are. They enjoy being able to kind of aspire into their ISTP subconscious, be a bit more independent, be a little bit more independently thinking, say what they think, be able to have that perspective and do their own thing and be alone sometimes. Their INFP kind of opposes them. It says, am I a good person? Am I contributing to myself? What are other people going to do? Am I understanding the potential consequences? And then the ESTJ comes out as the superego that demands respect when it feels like people aren't appreciating the value it's providing. And that's just generally how it works. That ego and the other sides of the mind, right? They start with that ENFJ perspective. They want to become a little bit more like their ISTP side. They back up to an INFP side, and their last resort is that ESTJ side when they feel like the disrespect from other people has just become too great. And that's just generally how it works, right? The ENFJ ego being as kind as possible, right? Trying to create a good structure for other people, being a structure type, leading in that way. That ISTP side being more analytical, doing what works, being pragmatic. The INFP shadow trying to be aware of its own emotions, even with that negativity, its own feelings. How do I feel about this? And the ESTJ superego reminds the ego that it can't give too much, and it must not tolerate disrespect, and it must demand respect. So a very opposing side, which kind of helps an ENFJ be balanced between all of their 8 functions. So I hope this explains a little bit about an ENFJ. It is a deep dive, but at the same time, there are just so many things to be said, I am creating a course on each of the personality types that will go even more in depth into every single thing if you're looking to master yourself. I hope this kind of helps explain just a little bit about it, though. Leave a comment down below about what you think about the topic and if you're an ENFJ, and just your general views on the channel as well. And thank you all so much for watching. Please subscribe and ring the bell as it helps the channel, and I hope you all have a great day.